Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome into the podcast. On today's podcast, we will be talking about what is a head of household entitled to, or what does he deserve in a domestic discipline relationship?
But before we get to that, I just want to remind you to hit that like button, and also don't forget to subscribe, because you know every time you hit that subscribe button, I smile.
And if you want ways to support the channel, get bonus content, really dive deeper into the topic of domestic discipline, a link to our Patreon is down below, and that's where we keep all of that content.
So, what is the head of household, I guess, should we use the word entitled to, perhaps?
I think so. I think that there are certain entitlements that when you enter into a domestic discipline relationship, and let's be really specific, like we're talking about a domestic discipline relationship. We're not talking about every relationship you're ever in. But when you agree to incorporate domestic discipline into your relationship, a head of household, the title, the role, the authority, it does come with certain entitlements in the relationship. You could also say what he deserves from his taken in hand, what he deserves from the relationship. And so that's kind of what we're going to go through.
You know, as we were thinking about this topic, and as we were getting ready to talk about this, one of the things that I really wanted to know was, you know, I've never looked up the definition of the word entitled before, and it actually means that it's something that you have rightfully earned. And I think that's really important when talking about a domestic discipline relationship. What is the head of household rightfully earned as being the head of household?
I think that that's good, because we do look at it as a negative, because most of the time when people use the term entitlement, when they talk about being entitled, it is used as a negative, but it's negative when you haven't earned it.
That's right.
It's negative when you feel like you deserve things that you really don't deserve. But it's not negative when those things are deserved, when those things are earned. It's actually a really positive thing to look at, what am I entitled to in this situation?
Yeah, and so as for the head of household, then I started to try to think about, okay, what are those things that as you enter into a domestic discipline relationship, what are those things that they're entitled to, that I'm entitled to as the head of household? And the first one that came to mind was respect.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about that, you know, in our pillars and different podcasts and everything, but I really think respect is one of those things that can be really glossed over. It can be thought of as kind of an afterthought, but really that was the one that kept coming to mind first, is that the head of household really is entitled to the respect. And how can he do anything else if he's not getting respect from his taken in hand?
Yes. When you enter into domestic discipline, you are doing so with the understanding that there are certain things that you have to give your head of household as a taken in hand. And respect is paramount. That is almost the cornerstone of everything else that happens in your relationship. So absolutely, a man who decides to become a head of household is doing so with the understanding of the work that's involved, with the understanding of the responsibility that's involved. And when he takes that on, when he decides to take on that title, take on that role, that deserves respect in and of itself.
Yeah, and I was thinking, you know, being obviously a man myself, that's one of the ways really that taken in hands that you show love to him as well. I mean, men more than anything, when we are having trouble in our relationships, it a lot of times is a lack of respect. We don't feel respected by our taken in hands. And so that's why I really felt like it was important for us to start with that, because respect is one of those things that I think really lays the foundation, especially for him, and what he needs to be able to lead his household well. And if there's a lack of respect there, obviously that's where things can unravel rather quickly.
I think you also deserve, a head of household deserves their taken in hands obedience.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Because If a head of household is making decisions, if he is taking on the responsibility of not only making the decisions, but living with the ramifications of those decisions, he needs to be able to trust and know that you are going to obey what he tells you to do, that you're going to be obedient to his decisions. And he deserves that, because if he is taking on the weight of the responsibility, then he needs to know that you're going to do what you are told to do.
I'm actually really glad that you brought that up second, because I feel like respect and then obedience kind of go hand in hand, because without respect, I don't think you're necessarily going to get obedience. But if you put obedience before respect, I'm not sure that it exactly works there. And you're absolutely right. The head of household needs for you and is entitled to your obedience. Why? Because if they're going to follow through with all of the expectations that you guys have set in this domestic discipline relationship, in terms of holding you accountable to the rules and trying to make you a better person, holding you accountable to new habits that you're trying to do, and also, again, leading your household in the way that it needs to go, then that's expected. That's just the right thing to do when he is putting himself forward in that way and trying to lead your family and you in that responsible way.
The next thing that comes to mind for me is honor. Now, a lot of people like to think of honor and respect as the same thing. I don't think that they're the same thing. They are very different.
I agree with you.
Respect means understanding who your head of household is, what their position is, and acting accordingly. Honoring them is allowing that respect to influence how you conduct yourself.
Right. It's almost like, you can be respectful and obedient, but not with a joyous or grateful heart a little bit. It's almost like having a good attitude, right, towards those things. When you honor someone, you're saying, you know what, I'm just going to have a good attitude about it.
The honor aspect is having a good attitude, and it's allowing who my head of household is, the respect I hold for them, the obedience that I have. It's allowing all of that to influence how I behave and how I represent my relationship and my head of household, his leadership, how I represent that when we are in, out in public or in mixed company, or when I am not with him, I am still representing who he is and his leadership in my life. And I want to do that in a way that is positive, that reflects positively on him. And that is the honor aspect, is behaving in a way that I know he would approve of, that I know represents him well, and I do all of that because of how highly I view him and his position over me as my authority.
I love that you also brought up, how you're acting in public. I mean, how many times do we go out and we see couples either fighting with each other, or one person or another just really talking down to the other person, just being downright ugly. And so it communicates absolutely that honor that you're talking about, and the obedience and the respect, to just kind of put those back in, but really that honor by when you're out in public, when you're around others, if you're at a party, whatever, get together, and you're honoring your head of household, you would be surprised how that not only communicates well to him, that you are really trying to be a good taken in hand, but the other people around you are going to notice. They're going to notice there's something different about your relationship. I can't tell you how many times that we have gone to functions and people have talked to me afterwards about Aria and have just said, there's something different about your relationship, but the way you guys interact is so different than any other couple. And those are the times I'm very, very proud, because I know that we're really working well as a head of household and taking in hand. And in that moment, I do feel good, because I know she is honoring me. She's doing the very, very best she can to honor me in front of sometimes people who are my bosses or my colleagues, that I need to feel that respect from them. And she honors me by doing that.
The next thing that comes to my mind when I think of what is my head of household entitled to is he's entitled to my service.
This might be a hard one.
This is a hard one because this is not something that resonates with everyone, and everyone's going to look very, very different in how this plays out in their relationship depending on their circumstances. But for us, I am primarily at home, and so I view keeping our home in accordance to how Coda wants it ran, to his priorities. I really do view that as one of my duties and one of the things that he is entitled to in our relationship because of how we've set it up. And that kind of goes beyond domestic discipline, but I do view that as something that you are entitled to in our relationship. Part of how I serve Coda in a way that I feel like he deserves is that I make sure that he has the things that he needs. I make sure that he is, has clean clothes in his closet and that he has meals prepared when they need to be prepared. Because that is part of how I, through my service, say, I am honoring you, I respect you, I love you, and I want you to have these things. Basically, because he provides, and we're going to do a whole podcast on what the taken in hand is entitled to, because this is a two-way street. This is a reciprocal relationship. So there are entitlements of the taken in hand too. But because he provides me with security and leadership, I want to say, I want to make your life easier because you make my life easier by providing me leadership and security and all of the things that you provide me through being my head of household. I want to then make your life easier by the things that I can provide for you through my service.
That's a really great point that you just made. And taken in hands, when you are doing that effectively, you are showing that respect. You are showing that obedience. You are honoring him. And that's really all you need to do in a domestic discipline relationship for your head of household. It's actually, I always say it's simple, but it's not easy. And that's really what I think a domestic discipline relationship encompasses overall, is that it makes the relationship simpler, but it takes a lot more effort that way. When things are complicated, when things are, in my opinion, outside of a domestic discipline relationship model, that's when things get a little complicated and they get a little out of sorts, if you will. And so I'm really glad that you brought up that all of those little things that you do, and they seem little, but they're really, really not, go back to really touch on everything that we just said, and it allows the household to run orderly.
But we've kind of touched on this through some of the conversations we just had with that last point, but a head of household is entitled to make the decisions for the home and for the relationship.
It's what we've talked about again before, but it's worth saying again. If there is a tie vote here, I get to make the decision. But most of the time, it's exactly what we talked about. We don't actually get into drawn out arguments about anything anymore, because really what it is I am thinking about making a decision. I do give Aria an opportunity to say her piece, but I don't even ask her necessarily her vote or her decision any longer. It's just, would you like to say something about this? And then I make the decision.
Which creates a lot of security for me, because when he was asking me, like, what do you want to do here? Or what would you choose? That put me into a headspace of feeling like he couldn't make a decision without considering what I wanted. And I do enjoy giving my input. I do enjoy when he takes my feelings into consideration, but I do not like when he asks, like, if this was your decision, what would you decide? Because then if he went with my decision, it felt like a lack of leadership.
Right.
Even if he was like, well, that was better than what I was thinking. It still felt like he was cowering to my preferences rather than leading with conviction.
And so now really what I do is I don't really even tell her what decision I'm leaning towards, but I come in and I try to propose a question as, hey, we're going to do X. What's your feelings on that? And I just get her feelings on it. And sometimes I'm swayed, but a lot of times I go, I see her point, but no, I think we're still going to go down this particular road. And that's worked really, really well rather than coming in. And she will tell you, I still have moments of this because I'm not fully have untrained myself yet, but it's getting better. But there are moments where I've asked, well, hey, what would you like to do here? What do you think? And then I go, erase that and try to rephrase the question a little bit. But you brought up a good point earlier that it makes you feel secure. And I can see it now when I have those moments where I have to kind of backtrack a little bit and I ask, there is a little bit of panic that I can see almost on your face. Like I don't want to have this burden of the decision. Why are you asking me? Can't you just make it? And that's when I go, okay, I need to back up and kind of tell her to erase what I just said and restate it. And then it's almost this calmness that I see come over you.
It is absolutely. It is a huge relief to me to know that Coda's going to make the decision, and I don't need to worry about, first of all, I don't need to worry about trying to weigh out everything and make the best decision because that's his job. He's got that. I also don't need to worry about the ramifications because part of being a head of household, part of making the decisions and having the responsibility of making the decisions is that you are taking on the responsibility of how that decision plays out. Now, obviously, there are some decisions that I still feel the ramifications of if they go poorly.
Sure.
But that is still his responsibility to negate how much of the consequences of those decisions affect me.
And I will tell you, head of households, again, we've talked about this before, but again, worth emphasizing. Since I quit kind of asking, hey, how would you like to do X, Y, and Z? And I've just taken her thoughts into account, but I've still made that decision. And I always go in having almost made the decision totally before I even ask her feelings on something, that 9 times out of 10, the result actually has been good because I'm no longer second guessing myself because of the other way that we used to do it.
I completely agree. Anytime that Coda second guesses himself, anytime that he maybe takes too much time to think about it and he talks himself out of that first inclination that he has, that's when things tend to go awry a little bit more often. Anytime that he has just made a decision, number one, it brings me so much comfort to not have to worry about it, but it also ends up working out so well, so much better than what I would have been able to do myself.
I think so. And that is the point of all of this. If you give your head of household what he is entitled to, and I know that's good, again, that's a term that immediately all of us go to a negative feeling about it. But if you spin that in that positive light that we're talking about, give him what he's entitled to, I think you'll be surprised at the results and your relationship will be better because of it.
Now, the last point that I want to make, and obviously there are things that we didn't cover here, but the last point that I want to make is a head of household is entitled to hold his taken in hand accountable. When you enter into this domestic discipline relationship, you are entering in knowing the structure and knowing the accountability aspect. So to an extent, a head of household is entitled to that authority. And because he has that authority, he is entitled to hold that authority through the use of punishment. He is entitled to exercise his authority through the use of punishment and accountability, because you can't say that he's entitled to respect and obedience without a way to hold you accountable to actually respecting him and obeying him. You can't say that he's entitled to your service without a way for him to require you to actually do those things.
That's a really good point. Everything that we talked about really just got summed up in what you were just saying. Unless you, as you remember that the reason you entered into a domestic discipline relationship, that he is entitled to that punishment, that correction, and that maintenance. It's never going to, none of the other things are going to matter. And in fact, I think maybe you would agree, Aria, that by resisting all of those things, we've just shot all of these pillars completely down. You're not showing the respect. You're not showing the obedience. You're not showing the honor. You're not allowing. You're not being that servant. You're not doing any of those things by saying, nope, I'm going to be resistant to this, and I'm not going to allow you to follow through with the discipline, the correction, or I'm going to argue with you about it. Mm-hmm. Those moments where, well, I don't think I should be punished, and you have this argument.
Well, and it's like, if you don't agree to being held accountable, if you don't agree to the punishment aspect of the relationship, you're basically saying you deserve these things, but I'm only going to give them to you when I want to, and there's nothing you can do about it.
There it is.
And that strips the head of household of all authority when you take that perspective. And so in order for him to hold authority, in order for him to have any amount of authority whatsoever, you have to give him a system to be able to hold you accountable. Because as taken in hands, we make mistakes. Shocking, I know. But we're not always going to fulfill our duties perfectly. We are not always going to be respectful and responsible and obedient the way we need to be, the way our head of households require us to be. And when those things happen, the only way for us to learn is to allow our head of household in their authority to hold us accountable.
Well said. I was going to say I don't have anything to add there. Very well said.
So, of course, there are things that are going to be specific to every relationship that we didn't cover here. There are certain entitlements that will be specific to you, to the priorities you hold. But this is a good overview, and I hope this got you thinking. If you've never thought about what is a head of household actually entitled to, simply because of the position they hold in the relationship. And again, we're only talking about domestic discipline relationships here. We are not trying to imply that this extends to any type of other relationship. We are talking about couples who have an agreement that this is the structure that they are going to build their relationship on, and that this is the structure that they are going to use. So when you think about that, there are certain entitlements. And if you've never thought about what those entitlements are, I hope this podcast got you thinking about that. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What are some things that you think that we missed here? If we get enough of them, we can definitely do another podcast on this topic.
Part 2.
And talk through some of those points. So let us know in the comments. And do you have any closing thoughts?
Not really. Just continue to put your best effort forward in your domestic discipline relationships. And I think you'll be surprised at the results. So just keep working hard.
All right, guys, we'll talk to you next week.
See you later.